She couldn't forgive until she learned it was a skill, not a feeling. Emily's journal at 23. Hey, it's Emily, and I need to tell you about my friend Rachel. 3 years ago, Rachel's business partner stole her company. Not just the idea, the actual registered business, the clients, the revenue, everything Rachel had built from scratch. Rachel took her to court. Won. Got a settlement. Justice served. Right? Wrong. Because 2 years after winning, Rachel was still so consumed by rage that she'd wake up at 3 a.m. rehearsing arguments with someone who was no longer in her life. Her jaw was clenched so tight, her dentist said she'd cracked 2 molars from grinding her teeth in her sleep. Everyone told her the same thing: you need to forgive and move on. And Rachel wanted to scream, because she'd tried to forgive. 100 times, it never worked. Then she discovered something that changed everything. Forgiveness wasn't something you felt, it was something you trained, like a muscle, like a skill. This is Rachel's story, about how she stopped trying to force herself to feel forgiving and started treating it like going to the gym. Rachel met Morgan in a co-working space in Austin when they were both 24. Morgan was charming, ambitious, full of ideas. They clicked immediately. We should start something together, Morgan said over coffee one day. You're brilliant at operations, I'm good at sales, we'd be unstoppable. Rachel was hesitant. She'd been burned before. But Morgan was persistent, convincing, and honestly, Rachel was lonely, new to Austin, eager for partnership. They started a social media marketing agency. Rachel handled everything behind the scenes: client deliverables, workflows, team management. Morgan handled the front pitching, networking, bringing in business. It worked. Within a year, they had 15 clients and 6-figure revenue. Within 18 months, they were featured in a local business magazine. Rachel finally felt like she'd found her place, her partner, her path. Then Morgan started acting weird, taking calls in other rooms, being vague about meetings. Don't worry about it, she'd say when Rachel asked questions. I've got this handled. Rachel trusted her. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake? Not checking the business registration when Morgan said she'd update some paperwork to make things more official. 6 weeks later, Rachel showed up to the office to find the locks changed. Morgan had re-registered the business solely in her name, transferred all the clients to a new company Rachel had no legal claim to, cut Rachel out completely. And when Rachel confronted her, Morgan's response was cold. You were always too focused on the details. This needed vision. I'm the vision. You were just admin. Just admin. 2 years of work. Dismissed in 2 words. Rachel lawyered up immediately. The case was clear-cut. Morgan had committed fraud. Within 8 months, Rachel won the settlement, got the company back, got damages. But Morgan had already bled it dry. Clients were gone. The team had quit. The settlement money barely covered Rachel's legal fees. Rachel had won on paper, but she'd lost everything that mattered. That's when the rage set in. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, consuming kind that lives in your body like poison. Rachel would be at the grocery store and suddenly remember something Morgan said. Her vision would blur. Her heart would race. She'd have to leave her cart and go sit in her car until the shaking stopped. She'd be on dates, and men would ask, "What happened with your business?" And Rachel would start explaining, and her voice would get tight. And she'd watch them mentally check out as she spiraled into the story again. You need to let it go, her mom said. Forgive her, her friends said, for your own peace. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, someone quoted at her. Rachel wanted to punch every single person who said these things. Because she'd tried to let go. She'd tried to forgive. She'd meditate, journal, pray, tell herself, I forgive her, over and over, until the words meant nothing. Nothing worked. The rage remained, a constant companion, a loop that played in her head every morning and every night. What Morgan did, what Rachel should have said, what justice really meant, how unfair it all was. The loop was exhausting. Rachel could feel it draining her. She stopped sleeping well, started getting stress headaches. Her new business ventures felt impossible to focus on because half her brain was always back in that betrayal, replaying it, refining it, rehearsing better responses. 2 years after the court case ended, Rachel hit rock bottom. She was at a friend's wedding. Beautiful day, happy couple. And Rachel stood there in the back, watching people dance, and realized she couldn't feel joy anymore. The anger had taken up so much space in her nervous system that there was no room for anything else. That night, she did something desperate. She Googled, "Why can't I forgive even when I want to?" And that's when she found it. An article about the neuroscience of grudges, about how forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a neurological pattern you have to actively rewire. The article talked about the resentment loop, how your brain creates a pathway that treats past betrayal as a current threat, how every time you replay the story, you're literally strengthening the neural circuit that keeps you trapped. But here's what stopped Rachel cold. The article said most people fail at forgiveness because they're trying to force themselves to feel forgiving, but you can't force feelings. You can only train responses. Forgiveness wasn't about being nice to Morgan. It wasn't about reconciliation or letting her off the hook. It was about teaching her brain to stop treating a 2-year-old event like a current emergency. Rachel started treating forgiveness like a workout routine, not because she was suddenly enlightened, but because she was desperate and willing to try literally anything. Week 1, the 90-second rule. Every time the rage surged, and it surged constantly, Rachel set a timer for 90 seconds. That's how long, according to the research, it takes for the physiological response to anger to move through your body if you don't feed it with thoughts. So she'd feel the rage rise, the heat in her chest, the tightness in her jaw. And instead of immediately launching into the mental story of what Morgan did, she'd just observe the physical sensation. Okay, there's the anger, there's the heat, there's the jaw clenching. 90 seconds. Just noticing, not fighting it, not feeding it. The first week was brutal. Rachel set that timer dozens of times a day. But something started shifting. The surges became less frequent, less intense. Week 2, cognitive reframing. Rachel started keeping a document on her computer. Every time she caught herself in the resentment loop, she'd write down the thought, then rewrite it. Old thought, Morgan destroyed my life. New thought, Morgan made a choice that hurt me. I'm rebuilding. Old thought, I'll never trust anyone again. New thought, I learned important lessons about vetting partners. It felt fake at first, performative, but Rachel didn't care about feelings anymore. She cared about results, and the results were undeniable. Each reframe weakened the old neural pathway just a tiny bit, like water slowly wearing down stone. Week 3, pattern interrupts. Whenever Rachel noticed herself starting the mental replay of the betrayal, she'd physically interrupt herself. Stand up, walk, clap her hands, say nope out loud. Her roommate thought she was losing it, but Rachel didn't care. This was mental training. Athletes visualize success. Rachel was visualizing release. Month 2, exposure practice. This was the hardest part. Rachel started deliberately exposing herself to small triggers, looking at photos from the time with Morgan, reading old emails, not to torture herself, but to desensitize. Each exposure, she'd practice the 90-second rule. Let the feeling come. Observe it. Let it pass. Don't feed the narrative. Like exposure therapy for phobias. The more you face the trigger without catastrophizing, the less power it has. Month 3, the shift. It happened so gradually, Rachel almost missed it. She was making coffee one morning when a memory of Morgan popped up, the usual trigger. And Rachel waited for the rage. It didn't come. Not completely gone, but muted, like turning down the volume on a song that used to blast at full intensity. Rachel tested it, deliberately thought about the betrayal, about the unfairness, about Morgan living her life consequence-free somewhere. The anger was there, but it wasn't running her anymore. It was just information. Data about something that happened, not a current emergency requiring immediate response. For the first time in 2 years, Rachel felt something she'd forgotten existed. Space. Mental space. Emotional bandwidth. Room to think about something other than revenge and resentment. 6 months into the forgiveness training, Rachel ran into Morgan. Completely random. Coffee shop in Austin. Morgan was in line. Didn't see her. Rachel's first instinct was to leave or confront her. But she didn't either. She stayed, watched herself, observed her body's response. Increased heart rate. Check. Jaw tension. Check. But no spiraling rage. No overwhelming urge to scream or cry or make Morgan understand what she'd done. Morgan finally noticed her. Her face went pale. "Rachel, hi. I didn't expect." "It's fine," Rachel said. And she meant it. Not because she decided Morgan was forgiven. Not because they were cool now. But because Rachel had trained her nervous system to stop treating Morgan as a threat. The resentment loop had been interrupted so many times, it no longer ran automatically. "I wanted to say," Morgan started, "I've thought about reaching out, to apologize. What I did was—" "You don't need to," Rachel interrupted. "I don't need your apology. I've moved on." And she had. Not through some magical emotional breakthrough. Not through therapy or meditation retreats or spiritual awakening. Through deliberate, repetitive neural retraining. Through treating forgiveness like a skill to master rather than a feeling to force. Rachel walked out of that coffee shop and realized something profound. She'd reclaimed the bandwidth that resentment had been hoarding. The mental space, the emotional energy. She'd spent 2 years letting Morgan live rent-free in her head. Now Morgan was evicted. Not because Rachel had become saintly or enlightened, but because she'd trained a different response. If you're watching this and you're stuck in unforgiveness, whether it's an ex who cheated, a friend who betrayed you, a parent who let you down, I need you to hear what Rachel learned. You're not failing at forgiveness because you're a bad person. You're failing because you've been trying to force a feeling instead of training a response. Forgiveness isn't about being nice. It's not about reconciliation or letting people off the hook. It's not even about them at all. It's about teaching your nervous system that what happened in the past is not a current threat. And you can't think your way into that. You can't meditate your way into that. You have to train your way into that. Like going to the gym, like learning a language, through repetition, through practice, through deliberate, uncomfortable exposure. Start with the 90-second rule. When the rage comes, set a timer. Observe the physical sensation without feeding it with thoughts. Just 90 seconds. See what happens. Then add cognitive reframing. Write down your resentment thoughts. Rewrite them as data instead of identity, not to make yourself feel better, but to create new neural pathways. Use pattern interrupts. When you catch yourself in the resentment loop, physically interrupt it. Stand up, move, say nope, break the circuit. And if you're brave enough, try exposure practice. Small doses. Controlled environment. Look at the trigger, feel the feeling, let it pass without spiraling. It won't be immediate. Rachel spent 6 months on this. But the alternative? Spending the rest of your life imprisoned by someone who doesn't even think about you anymore. Forgiveness isn't a moral virtue you owe anyone. It's a cognitive skill you develop for yourself, so you can reclaim the mental bandwidth that resentment is hoarding. So you can finally move forward instead of being chained to the past. That's Rachel's story. That's what she learned. And she's still practicing it every day. Thanks for being here. If this resonated, subscribe to Emily's Journal at 23. Tell me about what you're working to forgive in the comments. And remember, you don't have to feel forgiving to practice forgiveness. You just have to be willing to train. I'll see you in the next entry.